Welcome to Oregon Voters Digest, the program that brings forward the social and political issues that are important to people living here in the Pacific Northwest. And now, your host, Bruce Broussard.
Welcome again to this segment of the Oregon Voters Digest. I'm Bruce Broussard, your host. Well, folks, we've gotten down to the point here now where we're going to be bringing in the new year, 2019, here very shortly. And so what we're going to do, we're going to take this opportunity to basically just wrap it up for 2018 in this particular show. And I think in the area, the way we're fortunate that we've been doing things on campaign finance reform. How do you get more people involved in the campaign before those last few days, if you will, where i.e. media and advertisement and big money comes in and pretty well take charge of the results, if you will, of the electorate to a certain degree, those who are being elected for that matter. And so, and it's nothing negative about the way we had been doing it before in the past, but now we've become so progressive that we've got the masses now are a bit more articulate in that arena, but still we've got large fundings and whatever that are basically running the campaign, and at the end of the day, a lot of times we're pretty well a little disappointed that once those selectees have been identified, because in many ways many of those individuals are not focusing on the issues of the masses. Sure, and that's the frustration that we went through in 2018. Well, actually, 18, the national election, and we saw that in the media aspect of it, with reference to the presidential election, but that whole layout was that of the public was saying, hey, because now they want to get involved. Hey, we got to clean out the swamp. We're just tired of the politics. We want people to deal with the issues at hand here. And we just, as you know, we just recently had actually former President Barack Obama, who spent 8 years, first African American that became president of these United States, and it really got folks involved, charged up to really get things going, if you will. And that too also had played a role in their wanting to get involved. And so now you've got big money now involved big time again. Here we go again, because before it was just that social side. But now we're back to the main issues. And we got a newly elected president, and Donald Trump. That's a whole different ball game. And boy, I tell you, if there was a money there aspect of it. But he was an outsider in some ways. He was an outsider, and not just the same old status quo. But we are 2 years into his election aspect of it. But people still are saying about, well, when are we going to continue to clean the swamp? Are we going to clean the swamp? He was an outsider. He identified with some of those major issues. He put his platform on the table, and so we got this charge on both sides routine. But that's okay. But we're transitioning. So, and the point I'm making is this: Oregon, I think, is ahead of the game a bit, because we were fortunate to have a guy by the name of Dan Meek, who was very, very much involved with campaign finance reform. And he's made several presentations on the show here with me and elsewhere. But the point of the matter is that he is in Portland, Oregon, and he's in Oregon, if you will, and he's been very much involved in politics, but more specifically campaign finance reform. And my definition of campaign finance reform is getting the little people involved, getting them involved in the process. And at the end of the day, we've got a better product, if you will, as far as the leadership aspect of it. And so what we're going to do this time around is that for this hour, the first hour, we're going to let Dan Meek articulate and educate you like he's done before, but a 30-minute presentation on campaign finance reform. And he has his own brand, and he's going to educate you about that brand and how it's bringing you in the fold, if you will. And then the second half hour, what we're going to talk about is some of the local, it's actually some of the local politics, the gubernatorial politics, the city of Portland. Come on in, Seth. So I've got Seth who's been very much involved. I've got another guy that's been involved in this whole process. His name is Seth Worley, and you've seen Seth on Oregon Voters Digest before. Very much involved in the process. In fact, we could have got involved at the county when we had the elections down at the county. But anyway, Seth's involved in the process also too. You'll probably hear more from Seth on the second half hour aspect of it. I mean, he'll be doing some injections like I will. We'll be basically talking to Dan Meek, and then Dan will be talking about his campaign finance reform and that whole piece, and then you'll get that education. It's going to be Dan's show on the first round, and then the second half hour is going to be Seth, Dan, and Bruce, and we're going to just bring it up and give you some live examples of what this mean and the results of the efforts that he had been making. So I'm really excited about this, and I realize that, again, like I said, this is the last show for 2018 for us, and when we come back, we'll be talking about 2019, and it's a whole new cycle. We've got a presidential election. That's a huge piece aspect of it, but that doesn't have but that really sets it up, if you will, about the legitimacy and making sure that people get more responsible in the elections this next time around. So I think we're about ready. Are we ready, Dan? We're ready. Are they still working on? We get.
Well, we're gonna find out.
Well, we got Dan. We're gonna check it out. But anyway, like I said, he may have to talk himself. He may have to talk the show while he's still working on the deal. I mean, he's got some graphs and things. Hey, trust me, that's not my thing. That's his Dan deal. I really appreciate what he's done, and we got Seth here sitting to my right and to your left on the camera, and get to understand this is community television. It's probably the only way. This is live TV. This is not a rebroadcast or editing. This is live TV.
Unless it is.
And trust me,
We're using a new method to show slides.
oh, new method. Okay, cool. And trust me, we've been there. We've done this kind of stuff before. Dan's been this. I mean, he's been there for years. I mean, in fact, I'm going to ask him right away. How many years have you been doing this stuff? I know you're an attorney.
Doing these TV shows, you
Yeah,
mean?
TV shows and stuff. How many years?
Probably
20?
15 years.
15 years, yeah. That's when I met you way back when.
Right.
Roger Cable.
Rogers Cable. That's
You
right.
remember that one? Roger Cable, big time. But anyway, so that's where we are. Where are we now? Are we ready to make your presentation about? Are you ready? Well, hey,
Yep.
buddy, have at it. This is Dan Meek, and you got Seth is here with me, and we're going to sit and listen to what he's all about. And like I said, you're just going to talk about campaign finance. Go through your process. You got a 30-minute piece, and then we're going to take a break. What, 30 minutes or 40 minutes? Let's say 40 minutes. If you want. Don't
You
matter.
guys just jump in.
Okay, cool.
Jump in with
Okay.
comments and questions, threats.
Sounds great. Sounds
anything.
great. Sounds
All
great. Okay, good.
Well, let's see how this new system works.
Okay.
Honest Elections is the name of the group that recently put
good.
measures both on the Multnomah County ballot and a charter amendment for Multnomah County in 2016, and a charter amendment for the city of Portland in 2018.
Okay.
Both of these charter amendments were passed by the voters by a vote of between 87.4% and 88.6%. So they were-
88 with city.
87.4 was city, 88.6 was county.
Okay.
So massively popular measures. And here's basically what both of the measures do. They prohibit contributions in races for county office and city office by corporations or other entities. It limits every candidate to receiving only $500 from any individual or political action committee. It allows the creation of small donor committees, which are political committees that can accept only contributions from individuals and only in amounts of $100 or less per year. Those small donor committees can then sort of regift that money to candidates or spend it on their own independent expenditures. And it requires that the 5 largest true original sources of funds be identified in each political ad. I note that our new method of showing slides obscures the bottom. Oh, I think I can fix that.
Can you fix that a little bit?
Move the mouse a little bit.
I can fix that. So why don't you guys go
You
ahead?
put it up there. Put it up there. No
Here,
problem.
go ahead and talk.
Okay. Are you following this set?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, you following? You getting it? I mean, we got to make sure that we got the viewers here that we got to get to. We already know this,
Yeah.
so we got to make sure. So where are we in his point?
Well,
When did you get on board? In fact, I was going to ask him while he's still getting this thing together. When did you get on board on this business about campaign finance reform? Because I know you were very
Probably-
much involved.
Well, the first major effort was Measure 47 in
Okay.
2006.
Which was?
It was a statewide ballot measure. There was also a Measure 46, which was a companion constitutional amendment.
Okay.
The statutory one passed, and then but Measure 46, the constitutional change didn't, and so that meant 47 ended up in the courts for a really, really long time, and so now we're here trying to do it again after some Supreme Court decisions. So.
And what impact did that have on the lay people? I'm just the average. I mean, I realize that you and Dan were constantly out there doing this other thing, but break it down in terms of.
Dan more than me, but yeah.
Okay, right. Okay, Dan. Yeah. Okay, but you got involved, so you just started. But what did that say to the people of your interest, for instance, like
Well,
that you got involved in this thing?
Well, Oregon was such an outlier that it was just absurd from the beginning that we wouldn't have any limits on campaign donations, and
Okay.
I was just stymied that supposedly progressive, left-leaning, Democratic-leaning, and even on the conservative side, the more independent, maverick conservatives, the two together couldn't get campaign finance reform limits. I thought that was just amazing. That signaled there must be some sort of major corruption going on in Salem, and so I wanted to try and change that situation as much as I could.
When did you physically get involved in it from the standpoint of trying to change it? I realize we're going to talk. You might talk a little bit more. Then we're going to talk a little bit more about it from the standpoint of the county and other races, or whatever.
Well, I was in the Green Party when I basically turned 18 in '98, and there was Ralph Nader's campaign in 2000. I was involved with when I was at university in Salem, Oregon, and so I was aware of the campaign finance reform issue there, mostly at the national level. But then it started. I got involved in the local state politics for the Green Party locally, and learned about the local state issues, and that's when it started to snowball from there.
Anything specific in regards to that drew you to that piece? Like, you about ready yet?
Well, it looks like Dan's ready.
You Dan ready? Okay, good. We'll get to that.
Well,
I've done my tech support.
Okay, here we go. Dan's back on now. Go on, Dan.
Well, the last provision there is that of both measures is that they require all political ads for candidates or against candidates to identify the top 5 funders to the campaign. Okay. This is something you might have noticed in ads in Portland on TV for against Washington Measure 1631 in the last election. That was the carbon tax measure, and they had thousands of ads on Portland TV by the opponents. But each of the ad had to have a large disclaimer taking up about half of the screen, identifying the top 5 contributors to the ad, and it was all oil companies and petroleum associations. So the supporters of that measure made their own TV ad, which consisted of taking that disclaimer and blowing it up to show everybody even more clearly who was behind the campaign. Now, who's behind our campaign these are just some of the groups, some of the organizations that supported our campaign, the campaign in Portland, including League of Women Voters, the letter carriers, NAACP, and of course the progressive parties of Oregon, like the Oregon Progressive Party, the Pacific Green Party, the Independent Party, and the Multnomah Democrats. So it was a very wide coalition of organizations, and there were virtually no organizations who took a position against it except the Libertarian Party of Oregon.
Okay.
And but there was not much of a campaign against it. This indicates the endorsements for the Portland measure. There's one of these. Which one of these doesn't fit with the others? I would ask you. The Mercury, the Scanner, Willamette Week Street Routes, and the Oregonian. Which one is different than the others?
The Oregonian?
The Oregonian.
Yes.
This is the first time the Oregonian has endorsed limits on campaign contributions.
Really?
Yes. In fact, they endorsed a no vote on the near identical Multnomah County measure 2 years ago.
Okay.
But they endorsed a yes vote this time. And in fact, there was an editorial in today's Oregonian supporting ranked choice voting for the city of Portland, and for districting city council races. So the Oregonian is changing.
Interesting.
The editorial board is changing there. So we're going to try to use this broad coalition to take another crack at getting campaign finance reform statewide. Oregon has a national reputation for having a terrible campaign finance system. This indicates the state integrity investigation by the Center for Public Integrity and Public Radio International
Okay.
3 years ago graded all of the states on various efforts to prevent or stop corruption in government. And it graded Oregon an overall F and gave Oregon an F in every category that was examined: public access to information, executive accountability, procurement, lobbying disclosure, except for legislative accountability, where Oregon earned the D- grade. On political financing in particular, they concluded that Oregon was the second worst state in America.
The second.
The second worst. I mean, no, the second worst. The top worst is at the bottom. You can't see it, but it's Mississippi.
Mississippi.
So we beat Mississippi, but we lost to every other state in control of campaign finance. That's because we don't have limits on contributions, unlike 45 other states. The spending on races in Oregon has skyrocketed since 1996. A good rule of thumb is that any particular race now costs 10 times, the candidates are now spending 10 times as much as they were spending in 1996. This chart just shows the amount spent in Oregon governor's races between 1998 and 2010. It went up from about 2 million to 20 million, but I haven't updated this chart to show what happened in 2018, where the amount spent was over 40 million.
40 million.
So the candidates for governor this time more than doubled the record amount that had ever been spent in a governor's race in Oregon. And that money, a lot of it came from very large contributions. One of them that received some public attention is here at the top. Phil Knight contributed $3.425 million to the campaign of Newt Buehler. And that contribution, I looked it up, is actually the third largest contribution from an individual to a candidate who is not himself, self-funded candidate.
Right.
Third largest donation by an individual to a candidate in the history of the United States.
In the history.
And if you include corporations in that,
Yes.
it's the fourth largest contribution from any individual or entity to any candidate, not himself, in the United States, the fourth biggest. And one of the other two that weren't corporations were given by the same hedge fund manager in 2016, hedge fund operator guy in Chicago. And one of his large recipients was Eric Greitens in Missouri, who was elected in 2016 and recently resigned due to various scandals, including use of a charitable organization to make campaign contributions. So this table continues to indicate that the Newt Buehler campaign took very large contributions from the Republican Governors Association, which gets its money almost exclusively from large corporations, from the Oregon Republican Party, and from several individuals in the range of $350,000, $250,000, etc. These folks are corporate executives in mining, in dental equipment, in batteries, and as the next table indicates, that there's a lot of them in the timber company. Most of these are timber cutting. And the amounts range from $90,000 to $256,000, more in other fields. So, a contribution in Oregon to a candidate for governor of $300,000 or $400,000 is not unusual. It is extremely unusual anywhere else. And as I say, third largest in American history. The Kate Brown, on the other hand, also accepted very large contributions. She and Newt Buehler both spent about the same amount of money, about $20 million. She received over $2 million from the Democratic Governors Association, which receives its funds also from corporations, unions, and wealthy persons. She then received about $900,000 from Defend Oregon's Values, which is unions, Oregon Democratic Party, which is corporations and unions, Everytown for Gun Safety, $750,000. It's funded by Michael Bloomberg, former mayor of New York City. Oregon League of Conservation Voters, $750,000, and a variety of other organizations in smaller amounts, primarily unions, software developers, heirs to the Stryker medical fortune, and Emily's List. Over $800,000, a national women's political committee that is also funded primarily by wealthy individuals, in fact, almost exclusively. So both candidates depended on very large contributions. So as we can get into later, that has an effect on what the government does.
Right,
I mean,
right.
it's no coincidence that Governor Kitzhaber received a $250,000 contribution from Phil Knight and called an emergency session of the Oregon legislature to lock into contract the taxation method for Nike, so that Nike would have a favorable Oregon taxation treatment, even if future legislatures decided that it should be something different. I think that what the legislature did at the behest of Governor Kitzhaber was unconstitutional, but nevertheless, when Phil Knight called, the Governor Kitzhaber and the legislature immediately answered. Same situation exists in races for the Oregon legislature. As this table or chart indicates, the races in the Oregon legislature have also become far more expensive, going from under $4 million in 1996 to over $28 million in 2016 and $30 million in 2018. These are the amounts spent by the top 10 candidates in races for the Oregon Senate and Oregon House each. So in the Oregon House, you can win an Oregon House race with about 12,000 votes. There are 60 of them in Oregon. And the top 10 candidates this year averaged $700,000 per candidate. And 2 years ago, they averaged $825,000 per candidate. The Senate amounts are essentially about the same. So it used to be that you could win an Oregon House seat with a few $1,000s and the help of your friends, a lot of your friends. But now, you may have noticed that even in Oregon House races, they go with saturation 30-second ads on TV, many of them negative and many of them misleading. The Oregonian reported, by the way, that Oregon legislative candidates spend more money on their elections per capita than any state other than New Jersey. You might also think, well, so what? They spend a lot of money. That doesn't mean that they win, except that it does mean that they win. In Oregon, in the last 2 cycles, 2014 and 2016, the candidate who spent the most money in the race won between 92% of the time in 2016 to 96% of the time in 2014. So yes, rarely the lesser spending candidate wins. That's typically when the lesser spending candidate also spends $500,000, but spends slightly less than the loser. So that's the situation we face on the state level. The question is, what will we do about it? And what should be done about it is the enactment of our initiative petition number 1 for 2020. And we can get to the text of that. We can get to the text of that in a second. What do you have to say, Seth?
Oh,
What do you have to add, Seth?
this is interesting. Recently, I've been getting a trickle of. I filed like almost 80 campaign finance complaints because the.
And don't forget about mine.
Right.
Yeah, don't forget about mine too when I was running.
And I've just been getting a trickle of the final decisions on those from the Secretary of State's office, and I'm noticing some pattern on these big spenders lists.
Look at the top. Look at the top of the list.
Can you throw that?
Throw that one in there, please, will you?
Oh, sure.
Please, throw that piece in there, will you?
Seems to be a lag, a computer lag.
You
We'll
do
see.
something.
We'll get there.
Get it. We got to get it in there. We'll take more time on this, by the way. We don't have to worry about the 30 minutes deal. Just
Right.
until we get this thing done.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
There
There
we go. The top of the list.
These are the amounts spent in races for the Oregon legislature in 2016.
And then check this out now. There's this top person, Janelle Bynum, Bynum. She's African American, folks, or black, if you will. I think she owns several McDonald's, if you will. But she spent $1,134,000 on a house race.
Yeah.
Right.
And her
About
opponent,
$100 a vote.
and her opponent, who's Mexican American, running against her. I think she's mayor, right? Something like that.
Of Happy Valley?
Yes, yeah,
Something like that.
that's right. House District 51. She spent $872,000 for a house rate. Now they were competing with one another. Of the two, now who won that race? I think it was Bynum.
Janelle Bynum.
Janelle Bynum. She bid $1,134,000. Another $891. That's over $2 million for a house race.
Right.
Yeah.
What happened in Northeast Portland?
What happened in Northeast Portland?
In fact, what happened in Multnomah County?
I don't know what you're asking.
I'm talking about the people who were running for office. Who won the?
Well, they don't spend a lot in Portland because they're uncontested races usually.
Is that what it was?
Oh, for the legislature, yeah.
Yeah, they're mostly swing districts where you get these big spending. If the election's over in the primary, there'll be a little bit less spending.
Yeah, the Oregon's legislative races cost a whole lot, even though most of them are totally uncontested. They're not contested. I mean, in the general election, they're not really contested in the city of Portland because the Democrats are going to win. They're not really contested in rural areas because the Republicans are going to win. Nevertheless, Oregon races are still more expensive than anywhere than New Jersey. And legislators in New Jersey have to buy into the New York City media market in the north. They have to buy into Philadelphia in the south. So we're really a tremendous outlier. And so what are we going to do about it? Well, we're going to enact Initiative Petition 1 of 2020, which will be coming up right now. There it is. Which amends the Oregon Constitution and just says Oregon laws consistent with the freedom of speech guarantee of the United States Constitution may regulate contributions and expenditures of any type or description to influence the outcome of any election, provided such laws are adopted or amended by an elected legislative body by a 3/4 vote of each chamber or by initiative.
Okay.
So, a couple of features here. One is the 3/4 vote requirement. What has happened in other states is that citizens have adopted campaign finance reforms by initiative, and then either immediately or a few short years later, the sitting legislature repeals them. This happened in Massachusetts in 2003. Massachusetts voters enacted a full public funding system for campaigns and limits on contributions. And the Massachusetts legislature then repealed it on a voice vote, so no one could be held responsible for it. Same thing happened in Missouri about 4 years later, and in just 2 years ago, 2016, South Dakota voters adopted public funding of elections and limits on campaign contributions. And the South Dakota legislature was called into emergency session immediately after the November 2016 election to repeal it. So that's why this says that the legislature can't amend anything that the voters do by initiative except with a 3/4 vote in both chambers. I think that's not enough. I think it should be a 100% vote in each chamber, or that the legislature should have no authority at all. But I'm a compromiser. I compromised, and we
But will local media, i.e., at the same time, take the same position that you've taken?
Local media. What do you mean?
Oregonian, Atlantic Week.
Well, it remains to be seen. A similar measure, somewhat similar measure, was on the ballot in 2006 statewide, and the Oregonian did editorialize against that. We have one difference this time from what we had 2 years ago, possibly a difference. And that is, and that is during the campaign, Governor Brown absolutely committed herself to saying it's a very high priority for her to get campaign finance reform adopted on the state level. And her policy document that came out about 2 weeks ago included this commitment: we must restrict the flow of immense contributions into campaigns. We must expose the big money that wealthy donors seek to hide. Governor Brown's primary goals are to refer a constitutional amendment to the ballot so voters in the future can approve the ability to impose campaign finance limitations in Oregon elections. So far, no proposal. Nothing in writing. We are always in contact with the governor's staff about this, and they don't have a proposal yet. So that remains to be seen whether her commitment will be effective. She could, of course, cause the legislature to refer a constitutional amendment to voters. She could simply say, I'm going to veto every bill until the legislature passes this joint resolution. or I will veto the bill that provides salaries for legislators, or something. But she could use her veto power to cause this to happen anytime she wants. And it remains to be, and we'll just see if she does. I think the campaign, these huge contributions are going to be a bigger and bigger problem for the Democratic Party of Oregon in the future, even though the Democratic Party has been one of the staunchest opponents of our campaign finance reform measures.
Okay.
Their folks, their executive director, their former executive director, files lawsuits to keep us off the ballot over the past 10 years at various times. They file lawsuits to delay the opportunity for signature gathering. The Democratic leadership in the House, Oregon House and Senate has never allowed a limits on contributions or a constitutional amendment referral ever to go to the floor of either the House or the Senate, and has never even allowed a vote in committee on it. So what happens is that the Democrats introduce, pretty good bills, pretty good joint resolutions, and sign up as co-sponsors. But then the Democratic leadership in the House and Senate never allows a vote. And so these Democrats will say, look at us. We supported campaign finance reform. Well, except your leadership didn't. And you knew that it wasn't going to come to a vote. So, in fact, the only vote that's happened on any kind of issue, even similar to this, is when someone has used the technique called withdrawal, where any member of the legislature can take a bill from committee and go to the floor of the House or Senate and say, I move to have this bill, voted on the floor of the House or Senate. So then there becomes an immediate vote on whether to vote on that bill. And so in those cases, the Democrats consistently vote against this when they're forced to vote.
And who represents the populace? Like, for instance, the nonpartisan media that's out there, like the Oregonian, the Willamette Week, and I mean, what about those?
Willamette Week has always supported our measures.
Okay.
I'm sure they will support. I'm not sure, but I assume that they will support this one, or believe they will. So I would assume, or hope, would be the Mercury and the Scanner, and actually the one publication that did an extremely good job in this past election cycle at reporting on campaign finance reform in Oregon was Street Roots.
Street Roots.
It actually did a great job. It did a very comprehensive and informative article. So that's what's happening at the state level, both legislative and governor's races. One thing I also want to mention, in particular, is how Oregon's system of campaign finance also lacks disclosure. Oregon's system supposedly is, well, let's have unlimited contributions and expenditures, but let's have transparency. But Oregon's system is not transparent at all. The Corporate Reform Coalition ranked Oregon as having the worst system for disclosing independent expenditures, except for 6 other states. You can't see on the slide at the bottom, it rated Oregon an F, rated Washington an A. In particular, Oregon is the only state in the United States that does not have a law requiring that a political ad at least identify its source. Now, when you see political ads on TV or hear them on radio in Oregon, if it's broadcast, you'll hear a disclosure. It's put on by some committee or whatever. That's because that's required by Federal Communication Commission, FCC rules, not because Oregon requires it. Everything except broadcast in Oregon, all political ads can be totally anonymous and not disclose. Not only what committee even put them on, but never disclose in the ad, of course, where the money is coming from. That's something that our measures will do correct in Multnomah County and Portland races, that we require that ads identify the top 5 contributors to each campaign. As this slide indicates, 11 states already require this to one degree or another, including California and Washington. It was particularly important in the city of Richmond in 2014. Chevron has a huge refinery there, had a series of explosions, releases of toxic gas clouds. So the city council of Richmond started debating a resolution to require Chevron to at least notify the city when a toxic gas cloud was on its way. So Chevron decided, well, we're just going to take over the city government instead. So they recruited candidates for all of the positions of the city council and mayorship. They spent over $3 million promoting them over an environmental slate of candidates, outspending the environmentalists 50 to 1. Everyone expected these Chevron candidates to win, but every one of their ads had to say somewhere on the ad, major funding for this ad is from Chevron Inc. And all of the Chevron candidates overwhelmingly lost.
Really?
Yeah. So just imagine in Oregon, if you had races where every ad by Newt Buehler would have to say that, this ad, the top 5 funders of this campaign were
Phil Knight,
Phil Knight,
Republican Governors Association.
Well, even that you'd have to drill down to
Yeah.
the individual corporations that contributed the money.
You think Koch brothers probably?
Right. Let's see, and various timber company executives, various construction companies, the head of Advantage Dental Plan, a Taco Bell franchisee, forest and construction equipment corporations. So that's what this would do. You'd have to disclose where the funds come from, and it has a big difference because who is funding the campaign, I think, makes a big difference in the credibility of the message. And that's what we found out in California.
Okay.
Oregon has other massive loopholes when it comes to disclosure. For example, in Oregon, you only have 90 days to find out that someone has made an expenditure or received a contribution and not reported it. If they can hide it for 90 days, then Oregon law doesn't allow anyone to file a complaint about it. Keep that in mind, Seth. See, Seth,
I do.
Seth enforces the campaign finance laws in Oregon more than the state of Oregon enforces the laws. So that's a problem. Another problem is that Oregon allows what are called PAC-to-PAC transfers, so that you cannot really tell where the money is coming from for a particular campaign. If you look up a candidate's campaign, you'll see that their contributors are primarily political committees. The Good Things for Oregon Committee, Oregonians for Food and Shelter, which is in fact chemical companies. But so then you have to look up their contributors, and there are other political committees. And so you have to look up their contributors. And so you can hide the actual true source of the funds through a maze of PAC-to-PAC transfers. And that's what happens in Oregon, and that's what this Oregonian article in 2017 is referring to. There's another, even bigger loophole that that Tom James of the AP identified in 2018 under the title, Blurred Source of Donations Reveals Quirk in Law. Oregon has so many quirks in campaign finance law, it makes you wonder whether they are quirks. Of course they're not quirks. They're designed flaws. And this is that it reports on one of the Republican candidates for governor, who it said nearly half of the money he raised can't be traced because it comes from 2 out-of-state corporations. And corporations can be registered without identifying the beneficiary of the corporation or the owner of the corporation. So it's a very easy way under Oregon law to hide the source of funds. This just comes from the Wonderful Things for People Corporation. That's it. And the corporations don't have to report where their money comes from.
One thing to note about the 90 days, though, is I believe that if an elections officer finds out within 2 years, they're able to act as if they received a complaint. So they could theoretically self-enforce it for longer than 90 days. But it's just the citizen enforcement mechanism that's been limited to 90 days for some reason.
The citizens.
Yeah.
That's the majority of the vote.
Right.
That's the majority of the vote, buddy.
Well, I'm trying to check on the time. I can't.
No, just don't worry about the time. Just going on.
Okay.
We'll just fill in.
All right. Here's another quirk. Ready for this quirk?
This is serious thing.
Oregon has so many unique laws when it comes to campaign money. It's amazing. Here's another one. In Oregon, it's legal to bribe a public official with campaign money, to literally bribe them. In Oregon, the felony of bribery is defined this way. A person commits the crime of bribery if the person offers, confers, or agrees to confer any pecuniary benefit upon a public servant with the intent to influence a public servant's vote, opinion, judgment, action, decision, or exercise of discretion in an official capacity. Very conventional definition of bribery, right? I'm giving you money, you're the public official, you vote the way I want you to, or you give me a contract or whatever, right?
Right.
Okay, it's also a felony in Oregon to receive a bribe, same thing. If a public official receives pecuniary benefit in exchange for doing something for the donor, then felony,
Right.
like every other state. But Oregon has this special definition of pecuniary benefit, does not include a political campaign contribution. So, I could give you a political campaign contribution and a contract. I will vote this way in exchange for my political campaign contribution.
And sign.
Signed, Bruce Burchard, legal in Oregon.
And that's enforceable in the courts, right?
Yeah.
Because it's a contract.
This is a contract.
Yeah.
Illegal in every other state. Legal in Oregon. So
my letter was null and void when I sent it to the state, Secretary of State's office, challenging the fact that she had gotten a contract contribution.
Oh, the state has this opinion that they're not involved in local elections for some
Yes.
reason. Yeah.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah, I got my there.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah.
When Seth has filed several complaints about campaign finance violations on the county level, for example, filed them with the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State is the state's chief election officer.
Right.
And in fact, under the laws, he or she directs the county clerks
Right.
on how to enforce the law.
Right.
It's his responsibility.
Right.
But whenever Seth has asked the Secretary of State to enforce campaign finance restrictions on county or city officials, they don't do it.
Well, I did the same thing, and the same thing happened to me.
Yeah.
They threw it back.
Yeah, there's.
So who do I go to? Who do we go to? You?
Well,
Dan?
I've tried to go to the county attorney and ran into a problem there too.
Did you?
Yeah.
The Portland City Charter amendment that we passed this just a month ago has a definite
Does it spell it out?
an enforcement mechanism that
It
spells
does?
out. Yeah, everybody gets to file complaints. The county auditor has a very short period of time to deal with them. There's discovery. There is opportunity for rebuttal, hearing, then
Subpoena power.
subpoena, and then it goes to the county circuit court.
Is it
rather
retroactive
rapidly.
with the county?
No,
Why
that
not?
wasn't in our county measure.
Can you do that? Can you
The
pick
county,
that up on the
we are-
next round?
We are asking the county commission to adopt the same enforcement mechanism by
Right.
ordinance.
Okay.
They can do that.
Well, use me as an example, would you please? I sent the letter to Secretary of State. They threw it out. Okay?
All right. You'll have to tell
Use
me.
me,
You'll have to-
please.
You'll have to tell me more about
Got
it.
the letter? Yes, we will.
Right. It's a when you get the voter pamphlet statement, it even tells you that if you see any election law
Yeah.
problems, any election law.
Right.
It doesn't say
Right.
just state election
No,
laws.
that's
It
right.
says any election law.
That's right.
You can file a complaint.
That's what I did.
And I was like, wow, I just received this in the mail. It tells me that's the case, but
I
so
even-
much is excluded from that.
I even called them after they bumped the letter. And they still said, well, that's not what we're into.
Well, should we?
Anyway, go on.
Should we
Keep
get
going.
into the
Yes.
to the interesting local race
Yes.
that we had
Yes,
here in
let's do that.
Portland,
Let's do that.
which was the race for city council between Loretta Smith and Joanne Hardesty. And I'm sorry that this slide can't be read because the text is yellow. I don't know what this means. But
Well, let's get-
oh man, well,
Let's we'll put it. We'll read it or something. we got it. Can we get that on there? So what happened? How'd you get the yellow?
I don't
You
have-
get the wrong sheet. Did you give them that sheet?
Oh, it's
we're using this this
you
different
got-
system
the
here.
analog color differences between the LCD screen and the
Right.
receptor.
But what this chart shows is that Loretta Smith's campaign spent $750,000. Joanne Hardesty's campaign spent $433,000. The amount that was raised by the Smith campaign in contributions of $200 or less was only 3% of her funds. It was 28% of Joanne Hardesty's funds. So she raised far more from small contributions. If you look at contributions, even those of $1,000 or less, the Smith campaign raised only 19% of its money from contributions of $1,000 or less. Joanne Hardesty raised 61%. If you then knock it up to even $5,000, Smith still raised less than half of her money in contributions that came in at $5,000 or less. She raised 47% from $5,000 or more. Joanne Hardesty, you can see this one because it's in red. The second one from the bottom.
Okay.
Joanne Hardesty raised 24% in amounts of $5,000 or more. And nearly all of that came in the last couple of weeks of the campaign. we'll look in a second here at the various. Oh my God, at the various. This also is not working because of the same
Same thing.
flaw. That shows the amounts of large contributions that Loretta Smith received. So I guess we can kind of look at those. Her largest contributor were the were apparently Vanessa Morgan and Robert Quillen, who run an organization called Self Enhancement. It's some sort of an edge. Do you know what that is?
Oh yes.
What is it?
Well, it's an extension of it's a non-profit organization. It's a charter school for Portland Public Schools.
Mm-hmm.
Portland Public Schools, Self-Enhancement.
Okay.
And Tony Hobson is the executive director of that organization. And you said he did what now?
Well, Vanessa, the founders of that, Vanessa Morgan and Robert Quillen, contributed $80,000 to Loretta Smith's campaign.
80,000.
The local electricians union contributed $41,000. Various property developers contributed $20,000. The Metropolitan Realtors contributed $19,000. The Equitable Housing PAC, which is landlords and apartment owners, contributed $30,000. The Portland Police Association contributed $20,000, and so on. Joanne Hardesty's, my God, her contributions, as I say, her large contributions came in right at the end, I think, after folks understood that she would be winning. SEIU, Public Employee Union, and AFSCME, Public Employee Union, each contributed $20,000 to her campaign. Raymore Construction, $6,500. Portland Teachers Association, $6,000. Another AFSCME local, $5,000. Her ex-mother-in-law, Mary Hardesty, $5,000. Her ex-husband, $3,000. Those were her largest contributors, and basically didn't have any large contributors until the last few weeks of the campaign, when of course she had to overcome the amounts being spent by Loretta Smith, who on 30-second TV
But
ads.
an article came out. An article came out in the Tribune at that point in time too, front page, in regards to. I think said you were sort of like involved in that article. What was that? That was
Which
front
article?
page. That was the one in regards to the lawsuit.
Which lawsuit?
In regards that that Loretta Smith. Remember, it was the one in regards to Loretta Smith.
Yeah.
That she actually participated before. What was that one lawsuit? That lawsuit that you filed? It was a front page.
Oh, that she, that Loretta Smith was on the county commission and running for city commission.
Right.
Yeah.
And what was that? Share that with us.
So essentially, Loretta Smith was a county commissioner and still is, and she was going to, she was being termed out. She was going to end her term on December 31st of 2018, and the county charter requires that you have to resign your position within that. If you're going to run before the last year. So if you're going to run in 2018, it's fine. But if you're going to run in 2017, you have to resign your position if you're going to run for something other than the current office you're going to run for. And so what she had done is she knew that she couldn't really run for city commission without doing something. But she wanted to run on September 12th of 2017. But she announced that I plan on running and I will eventually run, maybe in 2018, and created a campaign committee, hired a campaign manager, started taking a bunch of money, and started depositing it in her county account, because by filing a city account, that could create problems too, because that would look like you're actually running. And so it was an attempt to get around the requirement that she wait until January 1st to actually start running. But Joanne Hardesty was running and making some inroads and getting donations, and Loretta wanted to make sure that people knew that she was going to be involved and try and prevent that snowballing around Joanne Hardesty. So she had to do something. So she ended up doing it, announced press releases, articles came out as a result of it, And I just looked at the charter and was like, well, like, this isn't right because you're doing everything that running for office entails. And if you look in the state statutes, it has a definition of what a candidate is. And there were 4 different means by which he was being a candidate. So I filed an election law complaint that said, this is a violation of the county charter. It's also a violation of the state statutes where you're required to update your campaign account with an amendment or a new campaign account that says you're running for a particular office. And because donations that go to a campaign account must be associated to a particular race, and if they're not, that's something that's violatable. It's a violation if you don't amend within 10 days. And so I filed these legal documents, and the Secretary of State came back and said, well, we agree with you that they're a candidate in regards to state law, and then
we're finding a violation.
And they found a violation, and but on all the local election law stuff, the county stuff, they punted on it and said,
yes, they did.
It's not a state law, and
Right.
therefore we don't know anything about this. Don't ask us to do anything. Ignored it.
Yep.
And I also filed with the county director of elections and county attorney and told them, please look into this. You're the county attorney, you have to enforce the charter, so on and so forth. And then that became trouble trying to get that enforced, and we're still in the process of trying to do that.
And Deborah Kaffour didn't want to talk about the issue. She's the chair of Multnomah County and wanted to bring that issue up. In fact, at the board when we were being interviewed by the Tribune, and to this date, I've not been able to get a copy of the tape.
Right, I don't blame Deborah too much because, like, a little bit, but at the same time, there are some political issues between Loretta and Deborah.
Well, I know that, but she's still a chair. I mean, she's the leader. I mean, if she's been doing something wrong and she's got this information, she supported, if you will, campaign finance reform.
Right.
And if she did that, so she should have said, Loretta, you can't do that, and just had a
But
discussion.
ultimately, the entire commission is also responsible.
Well, right, I agree.
Like, Deborah can't bring anything unless everyone else will vote for it.
Really?
And so,
Well,
Well, she
unless
can
it
bring
brings
it.
two
Yeah,
more.
right,
Two
right.
others.
It would be a waste
Right,
of
right,
time.
right. But they couldn't bring it public. I think it had to been public. That's why I'm saying I brought that point up because as Dan was saying with reference to Joanne Hardesty, she had no momentum, and then all of a sudden some articles came out, i.e. Loretta Smith, and if you read that article, I mean, all of a sudden people were saying, "Gee whiz," it reminded them of some other issues aspect of it. So that's why I brought that particular issue was because she didn't win. Actually, she didn't win city council aspect of it. But then at the same time, because of Dan, when you lay out the contributors and whatever, it's interesting that self-enhancement. I take it these are the 2 people that work there or something like that.
I think they are the founders.
yeah.
The founders. They're the founders of SEI.
Yes.
Of
And
SEI.
major donors as well.
And major donors, $80,000, and and again that's an issue. It's an issue.
Well, it's because Loretta Smith had helped the county give grants,
yes.
and
Yes.
so it
Yes.
looks like there's maybe some donations
Right.
hoping for
Right.
other donations.
Right.
Now, I can't go out and accuse somebody
No,
since
by
nobody's
no
written a
means.
document
Yes,
that says
right,
it,
exactly. But my fact is, you bring the names up and whatever, and the Joshua Corden. I mean, I knew he was chief of staff for Ron Wyden, Senator Ron Wyden at that time, and he contributed $15,500.
Yeah, and just about half of Loretta Smith's large contributors are in the real estate business in one form or another. The realtors, property developers, real estate developers, landlords, apartment owners, and so that's where a lot of the funds came
And
from.
that's significant because she was the one commissioner to oppose the 26-184, the county measure, when it was going through the process of being approved for the ballot, right?
The county campaign finance reform.
And,
Act.
and
trying
the
to
main
think.
opponents of that, as we have learned, are also the major supporters of Loretta Smith,
Right.
who did come out in favor of campaign finance reform late in the game, but initially was skeptical.
Well, not skeptical opponent. She opposed
Yeah,
it.
right.
Right. So
Okay, good.
let's
We got
try
about
this-
4 more minutes. You
Let's
just
try
start
this
closing
one.
it up.
Let's
Go on.
just try this one table. Let's see if this comes out
Okay.
correctly.
Which one is
There,
it?
you can actually see that one.
That one.
This
That
just
one.
illustrates that
Where's it?
that amounts spent in local races recently. Ted Wheeler about $1 million. Of course, 4 years earlier, Charlie Hale spent $1.7 million, and both of his primary opponents spent over $1 million. So we're still talking about large amounts of money being spent in local races, and this is no longer legal for any of these local races, whether they're the City of Portland races or County Commission races, under the measures that we passed.
Well, they could raise that amount of money from small donors.
That would be it. They might, and I think Joanne Hardesty provided an example of that.
Yeah.
Her funds came almost entirely from small donors until the last couple of weeks of the campaign, and she could have probably just run her campaign without taking any large contributions at all.
But she had issues, and had this issue not been brought up, in all due respect, she would not have been able to raise the monies. She had issues. She had issues in the community, and the NAACP piece. They were writing articles about what she had done there, that she had been either misappropriated, i.e., spent money incorrectly or something. But my point is, it was an issue. But my point is that when this issue came to the table, when the Tribune started writing articles about the NAACP issues and things of that nature, they got to the table. And so as a result, then Loretta already had her PR.
Well,
And then the Scanner newspaper jumped in on the fray.
I think most of the voters who did see those articles
it had an impact.
realized the issues maybe were not so big as they were put out to be, because those types of issues come up because the opponents do opposition research and feed it to the media, and then they'll run a little article. But you really have to look at it and see how did it affect the voters, and given how much of a landslide it was, I think people looked at it and realized that Joanne's, what she had done there was basically just working for the entity, yes, getting paid.
Yeah.
And she was president, so she was paying herself with a check, but it was for work that was actually done.
Okay. We got about a minute.
They approved it.
We need to have that show, because in all due respect, we had 2 black women running only.
Yeah.
I still feel that if a white had been running either one of those candidates, they wouldn't have won. And that's me. I can give you that justification as we go along. My point is, it would have been a tighter race. And then all the media supported Joanne. All of the media.
But in the primary, white women did run,
Yeah, they
and
did.
they lost.
And that's what I'm saying. There was just the last 2 standing were 2 blacks. That's where I'm coming from. It's an interesting race. We need to have a discussion.
She almost won outright in the primary. It was really
She
close.
got like 48% of the vote
yeah,
or something.
Who's it?
Joanne almost won in the primary outright.
Yes, but like I said, until that media came out, until the supporters came out, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, it was kind of like, the public, the population, the majority, didn't know what was going on. And that's why by the way, we got about 50 minutes, 50 seconds left or whatever. But the bottom line is this, folks, we got more work to do, so you got to come back here. We've got to come back. We've got work to do in the next 2 years. We've got some major elections coming up in the next 2 years. And so we need to be involved, and that's why I wanted to do this.
We need to get campaign finance reform at the state level.
Got to have it at the state level.
And here's who to contact: HonestElections.com.
Go on, real quick.
There we go.
There we go.
HonestElections.com. Go there, find out all about it, and get involved.
Sounds great, folks. Well, okay. Join your holidays. We'll see you first part of the year. We won't be around. We'll be seeing some repeats. I may repeat this in regardless, but we'll see you. We'll see you about another 3 weeks down the road. In fact, we might open up again, Seth. Okay, all right.
Let's do it over again.
Let's do it over again. Sounds great, folks. Have a good one. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays to all of you. Hope you enjoy. Take care.